Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kentucky Small Business Development Center's weekly webinar. We're glad you're here. If you look to the right of your screen, which I'm going to point this way and assume it's that way, but it could be that way. But if you look to your screen, you'll find the chat feature. So if you have any questions for our presenter, this is where you'll post them throughout the presentation, and we will address those at the very end. If you want to go ahead and check that out, go ahead and tell us where you're joining us from today. We love to see that. Starting October 1st, the Kentucky Small Business Development Center launched our 40th year of providing assistance to emerging and growing businesses. And we do that by providing professional expertise, tools, and information necessary to make sound business decisions. And we do this at no cost to our clients, thanks to the U.S. Small Business Administration, who co-sponsors our program. It is then administered by the University of Kentucky, who partners with regional universities, colleges, and local economic development agencies. As you can see, we're part of a national network, which is known as America's SBDC, which has over 1,000 centers across the nation, including U.S. territories, most U.S. territories. To learn more about us, you can visit kybizhelp.com. There you'll find additional resources to help start, fund, and grow your business. You can also request personal assistance now by emailing info@kybizhelp.com or calling us at 888-475-7232. So as always, we'll make a recording of today's event available to you later this afternoon. So if you have any technical issues or you just need to step away, know you'll have access to the entire event. I'm Janet Flaw. That's what my note says. I'm Janet Flaw with the Louisville Center, which is one of 13 centers across the Commonwealth. And with me today, as always, my colleagues from Louisville, Dave Etkin, our Center Director, and Tony Sears, our Assistant Center Director. So good afternoon, folks.
Hey, Janet. Hey, Tony.
Hi, Dave. Hey, Janet. Hey, can I say hi to Phyllis Siegel? She was the first one in the chat. She's from San Antonio, man.
All right.
Hi, Phyllis.
Way to go.
Good to see you guys.
Yeah. Wow. So, everybody out there, say hello to us and let us know where you're from. It's always fun to go through the chat log and see. We've been getting folks from all over the country and even Canada. So hello there, Canadians, if you're out there today. So today we've got a great guest coming back with us today. You've met her before, and Linda Ruffenach is quite the entrepreneur. She was a former CEO of a $100 million international enterprise, and she's been through almost every different stage a company can experience, from fast growth to rapid decline to complete transformation. And she is currently the chief strategist at Execuity. She's also a certified exit planning advisor and a certified value builder. And she provides business owners with tools to find time to work on their business versus always working in their business. And we've been very lucky to have Linda come back and visit us today. We got so many great comments when she visited before. Some of the tools she did was just awesome. So with that, Linda, let's talk about revenue today, right? Uh-oh. I think you're on mute there, Linda.
Wow, it helps if I take myself off mute, just one of those small details, right?
Yeah.
So, Dave, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I've got, as you and I share a passion on helping small business owners and really businesses of all different sizes and helping them grow and to succeed. At Execuity, we like to call it total world domination. So, we may be a little bit confident in what it is that we do, but we really do believe every business owner can achieve total world domination. It actually begins with understanding where you are today, where you want to go, and actually building a strategy to get there. So one of the topic we're going to cover today is there such a thing as bad revenue? And I know many of you are thinking, no way, I want revenue. I need revenue. My business needs revenue. But, this last year has been one that's been full of challenges. And, I'm sure many of you are working to stabilize your business and trying to go into 2021 with a clearer picture of where you want your business to be and where you're going to take it. And depending on what industry you're in, you may have seen significant losses, but some businesses out there have seen significant gains. Some businesses have taken a direction that they never really expected to take. Sometimes businesses grow at such a fast clip with no time to truly evaluate if the new revenue coming in is good revenue. And sometimes, and we've all been there, myself included, you feel desperate and you feel like, and you begin to make decisions in the moment that you feel like that's your fight for survival, but they can have really long-term effects on your business. And so today, just try to provide a framework for how do you evaluate current and future revenue opportunities, and for that profitability and that sustainable growth. Because while that new revenue may be bringing you some additional dollars on the top line, what is it doing to your bottom line? And more importantly, what is it doing to your business? So with that, just a little bit about my philosophy and what I like to talk about, and is that when it comes to working with business owners, truly believe in the holistic approach, and that when as a business owner, it's not just your business you're worried about. You've got things from a personal goal standpoint, a financial goal standpoint, and then sometimes from your business. And so like to take a holistic view and approach planning from balancing out those things between personal, financial, and business goals. And it doesn't mean that they all have to be equal. It's just about thinking about those things and the ripple effects. And it really is about bringing clarity and alignment between those things. And, you know, a lot of times when we're in business, we forget about the personal impacts of some of this. We get so focused on the business, we forget that there's an impact to all of our decisions on the people that matter most to us in our life. So part of what we're going to go through today is how do you manage through those situations when you've got revenue opportunities kind of coming your way and you're really excited about them, and how do you evaluate them? So I'm not going to go too much into this because Dave did a great job introducing me, but just a little side note, I really am very passionate about working with business owners, you know, like being a CEO mentor. And just as a little fun side note, I'm also a whiskey chick and a bourbon badass. So at the end of the call, if you get questions about bourbon, I might be able to field one or two of them. So, so kind of moving on from there, you know, when it comes to running your business, you know, we all talk about this balance, and sometimes I get kind of like, what is that balance? Does balance mean equal? But balancing is all about balancing what's in your financial portfolio with what's going on in your personal and professional life. And it all comes from like, how do you balance things with clients? How do you balance it with suppliers, employees, and also maintain that balance of revenue and profits? And that's really what we're going to talk about today. And it's important to note that balance, once again, does not mean equal. It's about weighing the pros and cons of each decision you make and where that's going to impact other places in your life. So with that, here's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to tell you a story today. And it's a story of growth, failure, and key learnings that I took away from my experience. You know, the last 7 months have been challenging, and with a sense of survival, many businesses, I'm sure there's many of them on this call, that have made decisions that they never would have made under normal circumstances. And as we continue on this journey, we have to start to think about who is your best customer, and we're going to talk about what makes them the best. And what do you do if they come to you and they wanted to double their business with you or triple the size of their business? And how do you determine whether you move forward with that decision? Many times we get so enamored with the dollars and cents, we forget about the other things that come along with that. So we're going to kind of go through that today, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So who is your best customer and why? You know, I'm going to start with a little warm-up exercise, and no need to respond, but I will be curious afterwards to see how far you got into this exercise. So I'm going to take I want to take 30 seconds, and I want you to take a moment, and I want you to list out your best 3 customers. Actually, I'm going to only give you about 15 seconds because you should be able to get those pretty quickly. Okay, now I want you to take a moment, and I want you to list out your next 3 best customers. Okay, here's where it starts to get a little tougher. Now list out your next 3 customers that are your best customers. Now, if you're like most business owners, it gets tougher when you get above that first 5 or 6. And it could be because maybe you don't have that many customers, and so you've got a big concentration with a few customers, and that's great because many of the businesses that are on this call are smaller businesses that are working their way up to getting more customers. But even what I have found with clients that have 100 or more customers, it's very difficult for them, and I'm not talking consumers, I'm talking on B2B clients, very difficult for them to name their top 10 customers without looking at a report. And many times our focus, especially when we're leaders of a business, is that we focus on our top revenue generating customers, or we're focused on the ones that we're trying to bring on board. And sometimes we tend to forget about those customers in the middle. Now, note that I asked you who were your best customers. I didn't ask you which were your highest revenue producing customers, the ones you made the most money off of. That's what a lot of people begin to look at when they're looking at their best customers. But there's so much more to what should make your best customer. So we're going to take a minute to go a little bit deeper. So if those of you who have attended my webinars before, I always like to have a good takeaway. And so what I've created here is a way for you to look at your best customers. And I want you to take a minute to think about the criteria that's most important to you and your business, and take a different perspective on how you rank those customers. Maybe you're making money that could be costing your business in other ways. So the way that this is laid out is that we've got the revenue and the profit side. And so when you're thinking about your top customers, that's generally where everybody goes. And it's an important factor. It's not one that you should forget. And so begin to think about the revenue and the profit margins that you're seeing off of those. But also start to look at the concentration. How much of your eggs are in that one basket with that particular customer? That could be a good thing or a bad thing. On the next 4, and these are variable, by the way, I just put 4 examples out there that you could use, but you could take this and adjust it based upon what your business looks like. But I like to look at growth opportunity. Is this a customer that, one, is using all the products and services that you offer? Do you have the opportunity to offer them more? Are they growing? And do you have the opportunity to grow along with them? And that, once again, sometimes that becomes in that top 3 characteristics that everyone looks at when they're looking at the customers. But I'm going to challenge you to look at things a little bit differently and to actually think about what's the impact that this customer has on my culture. And this is one that might surprise you, but one of the exercises I like to go through with a potential or with a client is to start to think, tell me about your favorite customer to work with, and why are they your favorite customer, and what makes them great. Your team members fight to be part of that program. They love working with this client. They get energized when that client is part of the conversation or part of the work that they're doing. On the flip side, it's also asking the question, which is, which client do you like to work with the least? And when you start to go there, that's when people get really energized and start to tell you all these horror stories about the worst customer that they have, or how this customer called them all day, all hours of the night, every day. And you know what? They were a small client, and we were putting a ton of effort into them. So when you take that in alignment with some of the other factors, you start to view your customers a little bit differently. The next thing is really about connection. And this one, I look at this as more of a defensive move on your end, a defensive thing to understand, which is, how strong is your connection to that customer? Is the relationship just with you, the business owner, with that business owner? Is it with a frontline person who buys something from you, but the further you go up in the organization, the less they know about who you are? Even though you may believe you are an incredibly important part of their supply chain, Maybe you're not from the perspective of the CEO or the head of purchasing. And if you are looking at it from that way, that's where risk can get introduced into your organization. On the last thing is that is it renewable? And I look at this as kind of what's that ongoing revenue that you're going to keep from that client. Some of our work that we do, and my business historically has been project-based, and where I've migrated it to is to be more of a recurring relationship with my clients that go month after month after month. And so when you're looking at the clients that you've got listed, how many of them come back to you on a regular basis? How many of them only come to you once? How many of them have good contracts with you, or they have recurring revenue associated with it? Once again, this is just an example of the way that you can look at your customers, and it's a tool that you can use to really step back and think about who your best customers are. Now, there's a couple reasons why you want to do this. One, it really helps you identify which customers you really need to be investing your time and your effort in. Sometimes we get attracted to the biggest fish in the sea, and appropriately, we need to pay attention to that customer. But does that one customer detract from everything else in your business? And when you dig a little deeper, they may not really be your best customer. They may be your largest, but they may not be yielding you the same dollars that a smaller customer has. Or maybe you're missing a growth opportunity with someone that's in that middle, but you've never taken a moment to stop and look at it. It's a way to prioritize the activities that you've got going on in your business. So if you want to take that tool and use it, I highly recommend taking some time to do it. So I'm going to share with you a real quick story of, what if your best customer came to you and asked you to double the size of your business? How would you react? And can you handle it? And how many of you would actually walk away from it? Well, this is exactly what happened to me in my previous company. Now, we were a large customer care provider. We had 11 locations in 4 different countries, and we provided customer care. And one of our biggest clients was a large telecom provider, and they already made up 40% of our business. So we already had a concentration problem. And then they came to us and they said, we want you to build us 3 new call centers. You guys are doing such a great job. We want you to build us 3 new call centers. Now, keep in mind at that point in time, we had maybe 5, 6 call centers, and now they wanted to add another 3. And of those 3, they wanted them 100% dedicated to them. Now, here was the part that was crazy, which is that opportunity was additional revenue of $16 to $20 million for each call center we opened. And it meant almost 40% growth for the whole company. Now, the catch was we had to invest $5 million approximately in for each location. And we needed to look at what do we make from a profit standpoint, which was around 18% for each location. And that's before we took on any headquarters or overhead costs that it took to support. Now, with this client, we had a 3-year agreement that renewed every 3 years. But they had written in there that they could cancel or reduce our volumes with very short notice. But in this case, it was longer than many of our contracts. They at least had to give us 120 days notice, which was like, okay, we can handle that. And so before we started to make a commitment, we actually started with the math. And here's where the math went. That we looked at it, and so not to get into the details, but we looked at how much they were paying us per hour. How many people will we be able to bill for? How many hours will we be able to bill for? Getting to the bottom line, on each site, we thought we could make $3.1 million in profit off of that site. We need to have another $100,000 in overhead, but for the investment of $5 million, it made sense. Because when you looked at that return on investment, it came out to be we could get our money back in 1.67 years. So we also wanted to look at, so we had things that we wanted to check, which is, do we have ROI, return on investment in less than 3 years? Do we have the available capital? Were we able to execute? And what was our client concentration? Well, the big challenge we had was a client concentration standpoint, that this significantly shifted the balance from a small, it was already 40% to being well over 50% of our pie. And that was a huge risk that we needed to consider whether we took on or not. we were owned by a large company out of New York, and therefore we had a lot more available cash. So when you looked at it, it actually met most of the criteria other than the client concentration. So what did we do? Well, we decided to go forward. We started looking at what bets should we place here. And one of the things we did is when we did start to hedge our bet a little bit. So we agreed to do 2 centers instead of 3. The big catch was that they had to get online within 6 months, which means we needed to invest more into the upfront cost. And it also required all hands on deck. And we pulled it off by redirecting a lot of our resources towards getting those 2 extra call centers up and coming. But given that short time frame, it pulled a lot of our leadership in other places, and it limited our ability to grow some of our other customers and to find new customers. Pretty much everything in the business was put on hold or on autopilot to get us there. It did take us a good 6 months to get the sites open, and very proud to say that they were performing on par with other established sites within 60 days of opening that. Now, how we made that happen, that's a whole nother conversation, maybe another webinar. But we were confident that we made the right bet. But that was until the assumptions we built our business case on began to change. So we built our business case around certain assumptions, which ended up changing. And they weren't huge changes, but they were little changes, which included really a reduction in the FTE. And the hours stayed relatively the same. But by that reduction in FTE, we were instead making a 3.1 million, we were only making 2.4. Not that big, it's still, you're making 2.4 million off of a site. That's pretty great. We were investing overhead of 175,000 instead of 100. And now our investment per site went up another $500,000. So we were spending $5.5 million. So when you look at that and you look at your return on investment, which was 1.67 years before, it's now 2.5 years to get our money back. Now, once again, when you look at that, that's still not a bad bet, because a lot of times you're looking at, depending on what you're doing and what you're trying to grow, you're going to look at that return on investment and say, ideally you want it less than 2 years, but less than 3 years still isn't that bad when you're talking about that size of revenue. So we felt pretty good about it. But then 6 months later, there was an expected downturn in the economy. Sound familiar? We're all experiencing that right now. Now, at the same time of that, our client brought on a new leadership team. And they made the fun decision that all of the purchasing was going to be transitioned to a third party. And if you've ever dealt with a third party purchasing group, they can be fairly aggressive when it comes to pricing and how you manage your contracts. And added to that, our founder who brought on this account had moved on, and the relationships we had with the company were in the middle of transition. And so we were in the process of rebuilding many of our connections within the organization. And we were faced with having to renegotiate our entire contract. It took us 5 months to negotiate and finalize. Once again, huge distraction to our business. Our pricing was pushed down, and they added a 5% pay for performance penalty bonus, which meant that 5% of our earnings every month were at risk, which introduced some continual concerns that we had. Now, that bet we made before now wasn't looking as good as we thought it would. So it started to look like this. Our rate dropped significantly and went down by $3.50 per hour. The FTE number stayed around the same where we were before, but what we could bill per week was higher because they expected more out of the rate we were paying. We had to do additional meetings, we had additional monitoring, we had additional training. It was all on our dime. So what quickly turned from a pretty good scenario is that we ended up going, and our return on investment was almost 7 years to get our money back. Now you take that times 2, and you're looking at a pretty significant amount of cash and capital being tied up in the business to support these 2 call centers. So once again, I always like to say hindsight's 20/20. And so this is where the lessons start to come in. And the first thing we did as we went back and we reevaluated this and started to say, should we have done this or not? We started looking at what are the losses. Our big loss we took big losses when this new pay for performance they put in place went the other way. It was a huge risk. We ended up with a low return on $10 million in working capital, and took us a lot longer to get that money back. Fortunately, our parent company had the cash to be able to do that. But if we were independent and we tied that much cash up, we would have been in a very significant challenge and may have forced our business to shut down. We had our client concentration went up to 65%. It was much higher than what we expected. And, we had the economic downturns where all of our pricing and our volume got pushed down. And here was the tricky part. Contracts only protected the new sites. We had multiple sites that were already doing work for this telecom. And they basically, the way that it happened, we had to lay off over 1,000 people and were forced to close 2 of our older sites. And in the net, our EBITDA did go up. Basically, our revenues went up and our profits, but the profit percentage went down. And it went down by 2 points. And when you're looking at a value of a business, that's pretty significant when you've got your percentage points going down with your revenue going down. So it wasn't all losses, though. We wanted to take the wins. We ended up with 2 state-of-the-art facilities that we didn't have in place before, and they were significantly better designed for the work that we did and made a much better employee experience, which improved our retention. Our business did grow by over 30% in 1 year, which is pretty big when you were looking at a company that was already doing fairly well. And our revenue increased by $25 million, which put us over the $100 million mark. And for 1 year, we actually had new jobs for over 1,000 people. And we became a bigger player in our vertical and a bigger player with our client. And here's the piece that we were the most proud of. We were able to make a lot of this back up with the pay performance because on average, we achieved 3 to 4% higher billing every month than what we had anticipated. So the big question is, would we place the same bet again? Growing your business is all about taking bets. And this was a big bet that our investors were all on board with. We debated it heavily on the front end. And we were fortunate that we had the excess cash available, making that decision much easier. We tried to take a best and worst case look at the scenarios. We looked at a 3-year break-even analysis. We felt like we were doing the right things. And as I look at it and I look at where we ended up, even in hindsight, I still think we would have made the same decision if we even knew what we knew once after we got through it. We may have changed a little bit, maybe gone to 1 site versus 2 sites. But it was a bold move that we made for our company and one that taught us many lessons and actually allowed us to get bigger. So what are some of the lessons that we learned? And these are important. Big revenue numbers are exciting and it's easy to get enamored by them. It is so easy to get your dollar signs just glaring over in your eyeballs. But it's also critical that you got to dig deeper into those numbers. You got to understand what it's going to mean to your business. How much money is it going to cost you? Not just the revenue and the profits, because those are easy numbers to convince you that you should make every investment. But you got to look at, what is the support cost? What's the implications on the business, the rest of my business? Are there hidden expenses that I'm not anticipating? And really take a hard moment to think about those things. If you're going to be investing a huge amount of your capital, then you need to have a good contract in place. And this can sometimes be very tough. The bigger the client that you're working with, the harder it is to get that strong contract in place. And one of the things we did learn is you have to pay very close attention to the contracts. And this is a piece where most people miss, which is when you're looking at contracts, you generally look at them from a legal standpoint. You might look at them from a financial standpoint. You look at them from like, okay, do I have commitments in here? But many times people don't take the time to look at the contracts from an operational standpoint. Having someone in your operations really understand where some of these penalties come in play. Where are the requirements that they're putting on us? Are those realistic? Is that going to cost you more money than what you expected? And that's a place where it's really worth the time and the effort to get people to weigh in on those sections. And the other thing is run multiple scenarios and think about the good, the bad, and the ugly of what could come out of there. And make sure that you're prepared and you have all the information you need to go and place those bets. And one of the most important things we looked at this, which is keep a close eye on the relationships you have. Be prepared for change in that leadership. You may have the best relationship ever with one of your biggest clients. But if that relationship is only with one person or a couple of people and that person leaves, what happens to your account? Do you now start to become a commodity within the purchasing department? Or do you have relationships that expand beyond there that really help retain that with that client? What happens if they sell their business? What impact is that going to have on you? Those are the kinds of questions that you want to be thinking about when you're looking at business. So with that, I'm going to open it up to questions.
All right, that was a lot.
Yeah, I threw a lot in there in a short period of time. So good thing is I think you guys are going to share the slides with people and give them a chance to think about it.
Yeah, that's true. We will, just as a reminder, we'll send everyone a recording this afternoon of what we talked about today, as well as the slides and a couple handouts that Linda has included for you to use. So I have to ask Linda, based on that story, and it was kind of a riveting story, I kind of enjoyed that. Do you think that if you would have told if future self would have told past self to maybe try to mitigate some of the customer concentrations first before you took on growth opportunities, or what would you tell your past self now on that?
You know, that's such a tough question. And we face that question regularly at the company that I was with so long, because we always had a behemoth client. And sometimes they were different, but there was always a behemoth client that kind of directed and kind of influenced where we were going. And it's really, really hard to walk away from when you're looking at that size of revenue and you're wanting to grow your business. And it's hard to bring in another client that's of that size. When you get to that concentration level and they're making up such a large percentage and your closest client to them is a third or a fifth of what the size that big client is, it takes 3, 4, 5 new clients to get you to catch up at all to get anywhere close to where that client is. And that's really hard to do. And it does take a big investment in your business, because you're investing in probably additional sales resources. You're probably looking at different products that you're offering and trying to figure out where and how you can expand. And this is where I go back to knowing who your best customers are, because the better you get to know who your best customers are, the better you can define your offering and start to target in on the clients that you want that will help you with that diversification challenge. But you know what? I'd like to say we wouldn't have done it. And I'd like to say that if I knew what I know now then, but I probably would have done the same thing. So, and the big reason was we had a parent company that was really supportive. We had the cash. Now, it's a totally different story if you were looking at the cash and, you know, we didn't have that luxury of having someone back at us. And so if it was my company and I had to put that level of debt on the line, I probably would have been a little bit more cautious.
So Linda, have you ever, you know, when you run this analysis that you used on the sheet that you shared, have you ever fired a customer?
I personally, yes, I have. In my own consulting business, I have. And when we were at my previous company, there were a couple clients, we didn't quite fire them. We encouraged them to find other alternatives. Because it was becoming, so in the world I lived in before, it was all about people. And we had people that were responsible for delivering the product and service for our clients. And with that, our biggest challenge and our biggest expense was turnover. So we may be billing a lot for a client, but if we're turning over the staff every few months and it's because they can't work on this account or it's so difficult to do, then it starts to lose money and it doesn't make sense for our business. And so, yes, we've walked away from it. And in my current business, I've walked away from clients that aren't willing to put in the effort or the time to do what they need to do. And I don't feel like I'm adding value. I'm going to be the first one to walk away because I want to make sure that we're adding value to the clients and that it's helping move their business forward.
So you, Linda, and I are both certified exit planning advisors. And so I wonder if maybe you could share with the folks attending today the idea of de-risking your business to increase its value. Because that's kind of what we're talking about when you did your initial analysis and identified the customer concentration risk.
Exactly. Well, and it goes back to the concept or the assumption that when it comes to the value of your business, it's driven by revenue, profits, and the industry that you're in. Those are big influencers on what is going to, what the marketability is of your business and the value of your business. But those are not everything. There's several different key factors that will go in that are going to influence the value of your business. Everything from, do you have recurring revenue? How's your cash flow managed? Do you have financial controls in place? Is there a dependency or concentration problem with a client? That is a big one, and that will play heavily on a potential buyer. Now, you've got that. You also have supplier concentration, something we don't always think about, which I'm sure many of you on this call have faced that in the last 6 months, where if you have a supplier concentration where you're only getting most of your stuff from one supplier, and that supplier all of a sudden comes to a screeching halt, that has such an impact on your business, and the ripple effect keeps going forward. The also customer satisfaction is a big piece of it, and the culture and the employee piece, but probably one of the biggest things, and it kind of ties into the customer care side and the customer ranking side, which is how dependent is the business on you as the owner? Because many times when you start to look and you're looking at those top 3 or 4 best customers, and you go down a little further, a lot of times those are being held by the business owner. And if something happens to that business owner and proper planning hasn't been put in place, then the business is at risk. And what ends up happening is the legacy that you've spent so much time building now all of a sudden goes away because you can't work in your business for 3 months. Now, your clients might be tolerable for that, but what if you're out for 6 months? Or God forbid something really happens to you, and can the business go on without you? That's probably the most important thing when it looks at value. And that's one of the things that investors are looking for. They're taking bets too. They're taking bets on future growth and future revenues. And if they're confident in those bets, then they're going to move forward. If they're not, then they're not going to make the investment.
Yeah. That owner's risk is so big. And that's something I like to think through as, as a first step to see if you could take a 2-week vacation and not answer the phone from the business. That's the initial test.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's always one of the questions I ask, and then I also go, what happens if you can't make it to you can't work in the business for 3 months? 2 weeks is a big one, but what if 3 months? And what if it's longer than that? It's a challenge. And, it's one of the things that as businesses, even those businesses starting out, if you can keep that in mind from the beginning, you're going to be building a stronger, more resilient business if you build it to where it's less dependent upon you. And figuring out how do you get people the expertise, or how do you get them to where they can take on the task versus you. And I know we're all guilty of it. We all think we have to do it ourselves, or it's easier if I do it myself. But you're not doing your business any justice by holding on to that concept, particularly when you start to grow and start to expand.
Yeah, definitely. Tony, are you there? You got a question for us?
I sure am, and I do have a question for you. It comes from Naila. She says, this is such a helpful exercise to rank customers and assess how they fit our culture. Especially now, we are taking all the business we can to preserve cash flow on top of our big customers. I feel like I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. the second wave of COVID that would constrict the economy again. Her question is, how do you balance that in these times?
Wow. That's a really, really good question, and one that requires a little bit of thought. I think the important piece and what I would recommend is taking periodic moments to step back and evaluate where you are. And it's hard to do, especially when things are running after you and things are coming at you from left to right, and you're so busy working in your business. And a lot of business owners have really been faced with that, to where you've had to furlough people, you've had to lay people off, and you're doing a lot more hands-on stuff than what you did before. But you have to find time to carve out, stop back and kind of do that temperature check. And not to be, I'm not trying to throw that in there because of COVID, but it's a temperature check on your business, right? In where are you at and where are those risks? And it doesn't mean you're going to actually change what you're doing, but that awareness more than anything will help guide you when you're starting to make those other decisions. Dave, what do you think?
No, I agree with you totally there. And that's the hardest part, is this uncertainty. And I think early on, Linda, what you mentioned a little bit about, you talk about bets. I think as you kind of navigate the waters going forward, I think you have to make small bets. Try different things and move the needle a little bit with one way. Something you mentioned earlier too that I think maybe you could speak a little bit on is looking at your existing customer base and thinking through, how do you not maybe get new customers, but what can you do with your old customers? Maybe what can you do to develop recurring revenue?
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and there's another webinar I do, and maybe I'll get invited back to do it, which is, it's called Dollars Hidden in Plain Sight. And when you go through that exercise of just identifying your top 10 customers, it starts to reveal how much time and effort are you putting into those customers that fall out of your top 5, and are you growing them? Now, you start digging a little bit deeper down, and particularly, like I had one client that had over 200 customers, and they came to me wanting help on sales and marketing. We need more customers. We need more customers. But what it revealed when I started looking at their current customer base is they already had every brand name they would want. They had every customer that you would go out and tell a salesperson to go find that would buy their services. And they had been active sometime in the prior 3 years. But many times it was a one-off interaction. And no one took the time to figure out how to take that one-off interaction and turn it into 2, into 3, into 4. Because those one-off transactions, even $1,000 here, $1,000 there, and they don't take the time to realize that those $1,000 transactions can turn into $10,000 transactions, and those can turn into $100,000 clients, and they open up other doors for them. And it's really stepping back and kind of digging deeper into your client base to figure out, where are those opportunities? There's cross-sell, upsell. There's also taking and looking at your products and can I create a recurring revenue out of this? Can I put a maintenance agreement in place? Does a monthly service retainer of some kind make sense? Are there things like, the appliance industry is great at it. Like how many of you guys get the filter warning on your ice maker? You got to change that thing every 3 months. Well, part of that is because that's a consistent high level of revenue coming through for those appliances. And so you got that recurring, and they actually have filter subscriptions that you can buy, but you'll automatically get a filter every 3 or 4 months. That's where you start to look at your business a little differently and try to figure out where and how I can sell more to the customers I have, not just those top 5, top 10, top 15.
Yeah. I think, I don't know what the exact statistic is, but it's quicker and cheaper to increase your sales through existing customers than it is to acquire a new customer.
Exactly. And the funny part is everybody, you very rarely ever talk to a business that isn't investing so heavily in sales and marketing and putting tons of dollars there but they're not putting as much dollars into their account management, into their client relationships, into nurturing the clients that they already have. And, that's low-hanging fruit in many of the organizations that I interact with.
Yeah. Back to your example of the customer that you had or the client you had that had 200 customers, if they increased each customer spend by 1%, would be a significant amount to the bottom line. And they wouldn't.
Within 6 months, we identified almost $1 million worth of revenue for them.
Yeah.
And we started nurturing some of these. We did something simple things like we sent out a survey to all of them and asked them about how their experience was. And, oh, by the way, have you used this service, or this service? Well, suddenly they realized that you didn't just offer service A, you got B, C, and D. Well, I could use that. Let me go reach back out and find out more. And so there's little things you can do. And that's why I call them dollars hidden in plain sight that can actually bring in more revenue from the customers you already have. But it goes back to the earlier question. You have to take the time to think about it. And you've got to, sometimes you got to stop the car to service it. And you got to take the time to make sure that you're going in the right direction. And that's so hard to do, especially in times like this. But it is so important that you do it because it's going to pay off significantly in the long run.
Yeah. Tony, do we have another question?
We actually have a comment. Ann Shadle said that she's not sure if this is 100% accurate, but she's heard that it costs 4 times as much to get new customers as to retain existing ones.
I would venture to say that's pretty darn close.
Yeah.
If not more, depending on the industry that you're in.
Definitely.
So when you were doing the assessment of the client, your different customers, when you were ranking them, so to speak, that tool that you had showed earlier, Linda, and I heard you say that these were just variables that I selected. Do you have any tips where someone, if they wanted to use that tool, how would they put the other variables in? I don't know if you mentioned that in your presentation.
That's a great question. So when I started looking at that, I started thinking about, I tend to look at in a business, I'm looking at employee experience, client experience, and the financial experience, and trying to figure out what are the indicators or the things that I need to look at that are going to influence that. So the culture piece covers a lot of the employee piece. But like, for instance, in the business that I was in previously in the customer care, it was a culture thing, but there was also a cost of doing business with them and trying to figure out what the cost of doing business. So if we had higher than normal turnover on a particular program, it costs us a lot more to support them. Or if I have to invest 3 times as many resources that may not be showing up in that margin piece, meaning that it takes me 40% of my time to service that client. Yeah, my costs are probably hidden in the overhead cost, but that is opportunity cost that's getting pulled away. And are you really taking account of that? There could be added on expenses, travel. What are added expenses that you might not be accounting for when you're looking at that? This customer, I have to spend a lot of time. I have to go travel there. They're wanting me to be there 4 times a year. That costs me $10,000. And really thinking about that whole cost to serve for that client. And I'm sure if I had a little bit more time, I'd be able to come up with a few more, but those are a few right off the top of my head.
No. That's great. Thank you. That's really great guidance. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Definitely. So it looks like that's about all the questions we have. Linda, you have something else you want to share with the folks?
Yeah, I just wanted to share a couple things, which is, I believe that I earn all the business that I get. And so because of that, I will always take time for a free consultation and sit down with you to talk about your business. As Dave mentioned, there are a lot of different values, a lot of different factors that go into understanding the value of your business. And so I also offer a free value builder assessment to anyone who wants to take it. And I'll sit down and review with you. And the way that the agreements work for Execuity is we don't require a long-term financial commitment. Once again, we want to earn your business every day. So that's really important in how we offer things. So One of the things I put together was a special offer just for this call. And I understand a lot of these services come from the SBA, so I don't want to cross over. But if you really want, if I can help and you found this valuable and you'd like to get more time focusing in on your business where you want to tap into the expertise and the experience that I have, I've got a strategic planning quick start. And it's actually sitting down with you. It includes the assessment. It includes an estimation of value for your business. We'll actually workshop how do you create the strategic plan. And I'm going to give you tool sets like that you experienced today to help kind of look at your business. Normally that would be $5,000. And so I want to offer up to you guys that it's less than $1,000 if you're interested. And to take advantage of that, it's actually you need to sign up by the end of this week or reach out by the end of this week. So if you're interested, then here is the contact information for me. And I know we're going to be sending this information out, and I will get you all the information about the offer if you're interested. And once again, I will have a conversation with anybody and try to see if I can help them or point them in the right direction of where they should go to get help. Now, granted, you guys are already tapped into the SBA, which is one of the best resources you can have. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Dave.
Okay. Thanks, Linda. I will just say that this idea of planning to sell your business and getting it in shape, whether you do or not, is the best thing that you can do to put together a strong and well-run business that's actually so much easier to run than you're doing now. I mean, if you're struggling to do everything you need to do, if you're not putting as much money in your pocket that you think you should be, going through this process and kind of just thinking about, strengthening your business and de-risking it and getting it ready, it's well worth it. And I think there's some great books out there that you can do. You can read if you want to kind of take a look at it on your own. So contact us if you think we can help. We'd be happy to do so, and contact Linda for sure. So,
excuse me, you all. I have one more question that just came in to the chat. Naya asked, "What is the average cost to evaluate a business?"
To do a true valuation, and by the way, the estimation of value that I'm talking about here and that I'm willing to do is just truly that. It's an estimation of value. And it's basically assessing where you are on those key value drivers and using some basic information to put it together. To get a true valuation, Dave, chime in here. I mean, I've seen them run as low as $500, $5,000, or $10,000 even. It really depends on the complexity of the business and who you work with and how detailed it's going to be.
Right. So the higher price ones, basically what you're doing is paying for somebody's credentials so that you can support that number in court, if it's some sort of dispute or something. What Linda's talking about is what you really want to do is kind of get a baseline on where you are now. And that allows you to look at that business and see what you can do to increase your score based on your lower scores. And the more you increase those scores, the easier your business is to run and the more valuable it will be. And again, this is just not, it's basically putting away a management tool to determine next steps on what you need to do to strengthen your business. Would you agree, Linda?
Absolutely. And the one thing that I just want to point out to people, Dave and I are both what you call exit planners, right? But it doesn't mean you're going to exit your business. It means that you're prepared to exit your business if and when you're ready, or circumstances present themselves that kind of force you to exit your business. And if you take the time up front, especially understanding the concepts, it not only is going to increase the value of your business, but it's a much stronger business. It allows you to scale and grow more effectively. There are reasons why the investors are looking for these factors, because they are what make a really, really good business, and one that's going to grow, one that's going to scale, and one that's going to be profitable. So I don't think it's ever too early to start thinking about the exit.
Exactly. Well, we're coming up on the top of the hour. Linda, I really want to thank you for another great webinar. You are just a fountain of knowledge. It's always great to have you on, and it's good to work with you. Tony, you want to say anything?
Yes, I want Linda to know that she's getting some great comments in here. Brandy Drakeford says, "Thank you, Linda, for a wealth of information to evaluate your business and ROI and projections going forward. She appreciates your time and your knowledge."
Well, thank you. Thank you. It means a lot. That's what this is all about. You know, when I'm all about paying it forward, and if I can help you in providing this advice, then that just makes my whole entire day. If I can help one person, so I appreciate the honor to be able to be part of this.
All right. Well, thank you, Linda. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next Wednesday. Next Wednesday, I don't know if you guys have heard me talk about Profit First, but we'll have a great expert on the Profit First accounting methodology and learn about that next Wednesday. So please join us. And again, you'll get a recording of today's webinar and all the materials handed out for you. And Linda's contact information is on the slides. Please reach out to her if you think she can help you. And as we'll always be here for you too, if you think we can help you as well. So with that, we'll say goodbye and we'll see you next Wednesday, same time at 12 noon. And have a good day and enjoy the weather while it lasts. See you guys.
Thank you.